Hello everyone, welcome to the next session on Abap on HANA. In the last class, we talked about basics of how to consume a procedure in Abap system. We saw the techniques used with NetWeaver 7.4 using ADBC. And then with NetWeaver 7.4 below SP05, you have the technique called uh, database procedure proxy to connect to your procedure. And then towards the end of the session, I was showing you the disadvantage of using the database proxy or a procedure created in HANA DB, and then later on you are trying to consume it in a Abap stack, what problems you will encounter. There is more to these problems. So the first problem was the lifecycle management, of course, and some bit of lifecycle management has been simplified with the help of HANA transport container, right? So lifecycle management still remains a challenge, okay? Lifecycle management of HANA versus Abap objects, which is nothing but HANA real productive procedure and Abap proxy for procedure. These two things together becomes a synchronization problem and becomes a lifecycle challenge. Lifecycle management becomes a challenge for us. So lifecycle management of HANA versus Abap object remains a challenge in this case. The second problem which arises when we do this is it doesn't have any access control. So you don't have any access control of your procedure. So what happens is any number of procedure proxies can be created. So what can possibly happen is you can have one database procedure in database, and for that you can create multiple database proxy objects, and which means then multiple people concurrently accessing such a database procedure, which becomes a problem, and there is no central access control. Now imagine if you would start getting lot of calls. Suddenly you wake up in the morning and you will start getting a lot of calls from all the different people, your family members, your relatives. What will happen to you? Same thing happens here in this case. There is no central access control when you have multiple proxies created for a single procedure. And sometimes there is no reusability, because let's say I am a developer, with my best knowledge I see, okay, there's a procedure, I will create a proxy. But tomorrow there is another developer in my team who also creates a proxy object in the system, a procedure proxy object in the system. So there can be multiple procedure proxy, which is actually redundant in nature when you have a single procedure. So no access control, and a problem called redundancy also comes into picture with the procedure proxy approach, correct? Now, what else could be a problem with this approach? The third approach, the problem is no extensibility. So you don't have any extensibility feature. Like for example, SAP delivers you a standard procedure in HANA DB, and you had create, or SAP also delivers you a standard procedure proxy to consume it. But what if you would like to include your own custom coding, your own custom code in order to enhance that proxy, or in order to enhance the functionality? So that is not possible, because you would typically not get HANA DB access as an administrator, and there is no concept of body as far as database is concerned. The body concept is an ABAP stack concept, which is an extension concept in SAP, and it is not there in HANA DB as such. So there is no extensibility. You cannot enhance it with your custom fields, with your custom code. If you want to do something, that's not possible with this approach. So these three problems were addressed in NetWeaver 7.4 SP5. So from there onwards, we have got now new concept called CDS view and ABAP managed data procedures, which you typically create it in ABAP system. And once you activate or call these objects for the first time, it automatically creates the corresponding database object in underlying HANA database. Okay, so that's the new approach for any procedure which you would like to create. So new approach is called AMDP, which is stands for ABAP Managed Data Procedure. Okay, that's the new approach which we have it. So in this, ABAP system acts like a master for editing. Okay, for editing, activating, and transporting the along with basically the life cycle. Transporting means life cycle for the procedure object. Okay, so Abap becomes the master. Abap becomes the main entity here. You as a developer work with Abap stack. As a NetWeaver, you would connect to your SAP system and do all this stuff, and underlying things you don't need to worry. This Abap stack, NetWeaver 7.4 SP5 is capable to create the corresponding object in HANA database by itself. Okay, so that's what exactly happens when you use this new approach. Your Abap system acts like a master for doing all the stuff. Okay, so that's what exactly AMDP is. Now from interview point of view, that answer is not really true sufficient. So what is an AMDP? When somebody asks you in interview, how will you answer, or how would you address to some of the questions which are asked in interview? So AMDP in simple terms, you can say it's a ABAP managed data procedure, where ABAP system which is above NetWeaver 7.4 SP5 or on 7.4 SP5 can create an ABAP managed data procedure. When it is called for the first time, corresponding HANA database procedure gets created into HANA database. And this is basically to support code to data paradigm, or doing a code push down to the underlying database. Okay, now so what exactly AMDP is basically a standard ABAP class, and a method of that class which is used as container for AMDP. So what is exactly an AMDP? In standard ABAP class, what you create in SE24 transaction. Okay, basically a classes method, okay, are used as container for ABAP. Okay, this is what is used as a container for your ABAP managed database procedure, basically AMDP. So this is a container where you will write all the code. You're not gonna go and write now the code in HANA database or in the HANA SQL layer. You're not gonna call create procedure statement in HANA DB in console. You're gonna work with ABAP layer. You will create a class, and inside you'll create a method, and when you call it for the first time, that is when the actual database procedure gets created into HANA database. So all the SQL script code which you have were coding earlier is now added to this method. Okay, that's what happens truly. Then what advantage you get? You first advantage, which we will note down here, advantages. The first advantage, you get a syntax check now. Okay, you're going to get a syntax check at design time. You remember yesterday when we were calling a procedure and there was something failing in ADBC, we were unable to see where is the error. If you have done some typo or some problem in your code, there is no syntax check in the last approach. But here we have a syntax check now done on what you write. So ABAP stack is fully integrated, and it fully checks your SQL code what you're writing in conjunction with HANA database. Okay, so this is the advantage what you get it when you use AMDP. Second advantage, your life cycle management is completely controlled by ABAP system. Okay, that's what the main advantage. So you will create your AMDP in your ABAP system. When you run it, when you call it for the first time, the underlying procedure gets created into HANA database. Now one tricky question in interview: when is the corresponding database procedure gets created in HANA DB? It is not when you create the method, it is when we call the AMDP first time. So you can observe some delay in first time call. You that should not be used as your performance matrix. First time when you call it, it will create the corresponding database procedure. Okay, and name of that procedure will be class name arrow double equals to procedure name, or the method name which you created for corresponding AMDP. This will be created in your system. in your HANA database system. We will see this once we create our AMDP, first AMDP. We will see this in the system. This is what gets created behind the scenes in your HANA database. Okay. So this is what exactly an AMDP. ABAP, that's why it's called ABAP managed. ABAP is managing it. Okay. ABAP managed data procedure. Okay. Another interesting thing, these methods are always called as static methods. So hope you have gone through my Oops Abap training session during Fury training, where I have already explained about how to use a static method in a class. And if, of course, if you have knowledge on Abap Oops, you already know it. It's the class name, arrow symbol, greater than, method name. That's what you use. You don't need to create an object of a class to call a static method. So that is how you are going to consume the Abap managed data procedures into your Abap stack. Okay, finally, you're going to consume it. Now it will also give you a possibility to handle runtime errors. So when you execute something and something is dumping or it's causing an issue, you will get to know in the short dump information, as well as you have a ready-made class called cx underscore amdp underscore error, which you can use for exception handling, like we did exception handling for our adbc code yesterday. For ABAP database connectivity code, I showed you what issue database was throwing, and we were catching the exception, printing the result, and then we corrected ultimately our procedure code accordingly. Correct. So that's the whole setup. We have it here, and let us go ahead and also look at what are the preconditions before we create an AMDP. What are the preconditions? So preconditions to create or the steps to create a AMDP is, the first condition is we must add a class with AMDP. So you need to basically give special power. So if I'll say you wake up tomorrow morning and start flying, a miracle can do that, right? So like in Spider-Man, you saw when a spider bites the Spider-Man, Peter Parker, he gets the special power. Same thing happens here. If you want to make an AMDP or give your class a special power to be an AMDP, we must add a class interface. Okay, we must add an interface to a class in Abap to make it powerful so that it can become a ABAP managed data procedures. Okay, that is what you have to do it. So what is that interface name which you should add? It's called if underscore amdb underscore marker underscore hdb. This is the interface you should use to add it to your class to give it a special power so that it can act like an AMDP class. Okay, or act like an ABAP managed data procedure. Very important step. This is 100% certification question. The name of interface which you will be using to making your ABAP managed data procedure, or making your class as a ABAP class method as an ABAP managed data procedure. What is the prerequisite? This is the prerequisite. You have to add this interface to your class. The next step, an ABAP method parameter has to be passed by value, not by passed by reference. So all the parameters, import export parameters which you are going to add in your method, they all has to be passed by value, not passed by reference. We will see that in the system when we create it. Okay, next is parameters has to be a table parameter or a scalar type. Okay, all the parameters of AMDP has to be table type or scalar parameters. They should not be object. So no object or nested table allowed. Okay, you will not be using an object or nested table. Nothing is allowed. Is that clear? These are all the three preconditions when you're creating your method. Okay, now ABAP class which you are creating and giving special power for AMDP can include both ABAP and non-ABAP, which is ABAP managed data procedure. So the class can include normal methods also, and AMDPs also. Okay, there is no restriction that your class, if you create it, it should always have all methods as AMDP. Not necessary. Okay, this could be a tricky interview question. It can have normal method also. So method with returning parameters cannot be implemented in AMDP. That's the next important precondition. Methods with returning parameter cannot be used as Abap managed data procedure. Hope this is clear to all of you. All the preconditions, if these conditions are met, then you are successfully will be able to create your AMDP method into a normal Abap class by marking it with a special power, and then you will be directly able to communicate with the database with the code push down. Once again, the disadvantage is we have to make sure the client handling, remember, because whenever you go to SQL script level, you have to manage the client yourself. Okay, that's a disadvantage. Even with AMDP, you have to make sure that the right client data has been selected, because your code actually executes at the database level where there is no implicit client handling. Okay, so that is what will happen. So let's look at quickly the syntax for creating an AMDP method. What is the syntax when you're creating an AMDP method for an AMDP method? So what is the syntax for that? So you will be using method, method name, okay, by database procedure, okay, that's what you will be using. And then for your database name, here you have to put database name. Currently only HANA database is supported, so you have to put database name for HDB. Currently only this is what is supported with Abap NetWeaver 7.05 onwards till 7.5 also. Only HDB is currently supported. You, if you are using SQL script, SQL Server or IBM HDB2 or DB6, that is not supported. Only HANA DB is supported right now with it. Then language, of course, language is SQL script you're gonna use, because we are not talking about our language here. And then we have options once again. So options read only. So this means the procedure is not doing any write operation, it's purely doing read operation. What significance it is for database? Anybody? When you make a procedure as read only, what it signifies to database, what is special power HANA DB can run on this procedure if it is marked as a read only procedure, or if it is not doing any update operation? Anybody? Perfect answer, Shilpa. You are one of my best student. Parallel processing. That's exactly the right answer. I'm sure you will crack the interview about ABAP on HANA, wherever it is. So read only makes a special power to SAP HANA DB that it's not doing any update, which means HANA can run multiple things in parallel. And that was one of the very important point which I had told you, Funda Fox. What are all the important points when the HANA comes out of parallel mode? What are all the rules of the game when HANA comes out of parallel mode? You see, the moment a DML operation is executed, HANA comes out of parallel mode. So keeping the procedure read only, it indicates SAP HANA that we are not doing any write operation. Definitely HANA can go ahead and now apply the operations in parallel. This was already discussed in our previous classes. Thank you, Silpa, for the answer. Let's proceed now. So that's what we'll tell now HANA DB, that it's a read-only procedure. And remember, majority of your queries are about read-only, not writing things. We always look forward for optimizing our queries which are respect to the reads, okay, not with respect to writes. Especially if you look at the purpose here is to support analytical based applications on top of SAP HANA and ABAP, okay, which we will see it also in upcoming chapter. Then comes is options. Of course, option we have just discussed. And then we have using. Now one important thing here, you have to put DB table names, okay, all the database table names separated by space which you are consuming, or another AMDP name. So if you are planning to consume any database table in your procedure, you have to mention the name of that database table over here. Or if you are planning to consume another ABAP managed data procedure in your code, you have to mention the name of that ABAP managed data procedure in the using parameter. Very important point to note, that you have to mention it. So I will show you an example where we will consume one procedure, one AMDP in another AMDP. Okay, we will see that also in the system. So you have to mention the database table names or the AMDP names which you are planning to consume in the code of this particular AMDP, and then you can write all your SQL script code directly here within end method and end method statement. Is that clear to everybody? How will you be creating an ABAP managed data procedure? Okay, so let us go ahead to the system and we will create it. Once again, I would like to quickly point out the disadvantage of using AMDP. First is the client handling. Make sure whenever you're coding an AMDP, you have to manage the client handling yourself. If you don't do it, then you have a problem because it will do everything on the client. Of course, locking and logical unit of work, all the locking of database table and logical unit of work, which is basically a transaction. If you're doing any updates, then you have to manage it yourself because there is no support for lock objects in AMDP. This is pure SQL script, which is at the HANA level. Okay, so that's the syntax for creating an AMDP. So what happens behind the scenes when you execute? So when the procedure, when the AMDP is executed first time, okay, first time, the corresponding database procedure gets created in NRDB. Okay, that's what happens when you execute it. It will be created in your schema, which is used for ABAP system. Of course, not in sysbig schema. So we saw when we were creating from console, some of the procedures were created in sysbig schema. So in this case, since you're doing it from Abap stack, it will be done in the Abap related schema, not in anywhere else in the database. Okay. Now, what happens when you execute it? So when you call it the AMDP, it doesn't do anything, but it just calls the corresponding HANA DB procedure. That's what happens behind the scenes. It's going to call the HANA database procedure behind the scenes. Next comes is, of course, you can handle the runtime errors using the exception handling. We will also look at some runtime error example. Yes, Nag, please go ahead and ask your question. You can unmute your line and ask your question. No problem. I cannot hear you. You can put it in the chat box and ask your question. Please post your question in the chat box. Okay, let's go to the system and now I will try to create an AMDP. Let's take a very simple example. I'm just going to query the business partner information from one procedure, and then later on top of it, I'm going to create another procedure to find the total gross amount, the same scenario what we have done, total gross amount in different currencies or total gross amount in a common currency. I would like to take out of the procedure and I want to do it completely from above side. So basically I'm going to create two procedure, and one procedure is going to call this another procedure also. So basically we will do multiple things, creating MDP, implementing a business logic, and also see how to consume one procedure in another procedure. So which was one question yesterday El Hadi asked how to do that. We will see that in the system live today. Let's switch to our ABAP perspective, and I guess I have to quickly add this once again the server because just started my cal server and the IP address which was used yesterday is now changed. So I just have to add my ABAP server once again. So let me just delete this and recreate uh, a new one with the latest IP address I have it. So let me click on plus button and ABAP project. So choose an ABAP project, and first of all you have to create a project before you create a class, AMDP class. Click on next, enter my password, and then let's shoot and create our first AMDP. Okay, so let's go to the system. I will expand it. So basically we have to first get started with the class, guys, and we have to give special power to that class. Now, one very important thing to note here, that it is not possible to create an ABAP managed data procedure it is not possible to create an AMDP with your SAP GUI. You have to use Abap Development Tools ADT on Eclipse. That is what is only allowed to be used to create your ABAP managed data procedure. Very important point for all of you to note, that you cannot use anything else other than that. You have to only use your ABAP development tools here. Okay, so let's go to the system, and now we will quickly get started with the simple class. So I will right click here, and I'm going to create my first AMDP method, which is just going to read the business partner data from my database using SQL script code. Now you will see how important the SQL script learning will be for you now here in this chapter, because it's all SQL script code ultimately. Let's create a new ABAP class, give a class name ZCL my AMDP, and just name description my ABAP managed data procedure. And then let's, if you want to give superclass, you can give it, otherwise you can say finish. I'm storing it in a local object, so no transport required. Typically you give a transport request name, and that's my definition of a class. So first let me go ahead and define a couple of things in my public section of the class. So this is the public section of the class where I will define a couple of things. So the first important thing which I have to do is give special power to my class. So I have to declare an interface, and you see the beauty here is it automatically shows me the code completion in ABAP development tools. You see interfaces, and then I have to just give a special power to it by marking my interface name IEF AMDP. You will see it will show me the code completion. If I do control space, no, it is not right now. Marker underscore HDB. That's the name of the interface which we have defined. This will give a special power to my ABAP managed database procedure class. So power to class, so that it can hold an ABAP managed data procedure method. Okay, so AMDP is actually a method, guys, out of this class which has special powers. Okay, so that is first thing. And then let me just go ahead and create a new method into the system. So in the public section here, I create class hyphen method, which is actually a static method I'm creating, and I say get business partners, or I can say get bupa all. I'm just creating a method to get me all the business partners information, and this will export something for me. And remember, I told you one the rule of the game, that all the parameters which you are creating has to be passed by value, not passed by reference. So you have to use values, parenthesis, and parameter name. So I can use et underscore bupa tab. That's what it returns me. And then the type of this parameter is, let's say, tt underscore bupa. Now this tt underscore bupa, where it is coming from? Nowhere. You see it's giving me an error in ADT. So I have to declare this type in the class. So let me quickly declare this type definition here. So I just say types begin of, and you see it's giving me nice code completion actually, bupa, and I just use business partner ID, type SNWD BPA table hyphen PP underscore ID, and then say company name, type SNWD underscore BPA hyphen company name, and then say node key, type SNWD BPA hyphen node key, yeah, and then say end of TY underscore bupa. So that's my table type declaration, sorry, the type definition. And let's create a table type declaration now, tt underscore bupa type table of my ty underscore bupa. So that's a type definition in Abap I had created, and then this type definition tt bupa is used here as a type for creating my table type output parameter. Now what's giving me an error? Implementation is missing. You see it's saying Abap development tools are saying that implementation is missing. You can quickly click here on this error, and then you see there's an option. There are a couple of options for you. Just use add implementation for this method. Double click on this, it will automatically create an implementation into the class here. Basically generates a template for you to write the code. So now you can shoot and write your code in this, but remember we should apply our AMDP syntax now to create it as an AMDP method. Okay, so by database procedure for database name, language, SQL script, and if this is an optional thing, you can keep it or probably skip it, whatever you like. This is not a mandatory thing, but rest all the mandatory things. So what I'm gonna do is I will just declare this. So I will say by database procedure. So you'll see it is saying me all the required things. So you see it is giving me actually code completion quite easily by database, and then I can say p and it gives me complete code completion. Okay, SQL script, and then I can say using, of course I'm using one table. So let me right now skip the using keyword and see what happens behind the scenes when you're gonna run it. Okay, so it's giving me still an error because still the body is empty. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select some data from my business partner table. Basically I'll say select what are all the things I want. You can also go ahead and test this query directly into your HANA modeler perspective. So go there, open the SQL console, and just pull it out some data from a particular table. So I can say select bupa or node key, comma bp underscore id, company name from SAP A4H schema.snwd underscore bpa table. That's it. My query F8. Test it. It's going to give you the results. And remember, this data is coming from all the clients, so you should also include the client field where client is equals to, let's say, 001 in our case. So that is the right piece of code when you're writing in AMDB. Always make sure that you're handling the client field. That's a good, always a best practice. Okay, never write queries to select data from cross client. You are burning your fingers if you're doing so. Okay, so client equals to something, and this becomes now my parameter. So I can definitely go ahead and select the current client, or I can pump in the client. So I can also go ahead and pass an import parameter to this, and if probably not, then I can always hard code the client, of course, in my code, because it's always better to uh, you know uh, pass the client as an import parameter and use that value in your variable. So you can also declare the client value. So declare LV client, and then I can just use LV client. So I can say select session context and client field as my, or sorry, into my client variable. That's it. Remember, in SQL script, this is how your code ends with us, and this has to be declared as varchar of 3. Okay, so that's my piece of code. You can also take this procedure and just test this whole piece of code in your database procedure and pass this LV client now over here. Now you see the beauty here, it's giving me the error. So that's the beauty of Abap managed data procedure. It gives you the syntax error at design time. When you're writing the code, it is telling you what went wrong, what is that you've done wrong. Okay, okay, so it has to be from into this from dummy, that I forgot it. So dummy table, and I just save this. Okay, I should not use this guy in the query, and you see the syntax error is now shifted to the next one. So I also don't need to use schema because it's always default schema which will be used. Now you see guys, it's giving me an error once again. Now, can anybody tell me why this error is coming? Just now I told you there was something which I'm not doing intentionally. Because of that, it will give me an error. What do you think? What's the reason it's giving me still an error on this particular line? I'm using a database table. Yes, it is not added to the using clause. Okay, so in the signature of the method, when you're implementing it, you have to declare which table you're planning to use. So that is not done. If you also see it here in the syntax which I told you, using database table which you're planning to consume has to be defined, has to be indicated well in advance. So that's why it's giving me an error. If you highlight here, you also see the same problem. Abap object and ddec object must be declared in method statement. Local names must start with colon, and of course that's a SQL script smiley that you have anytime if you're using local variables, colon and your variable name. So let's declare that here using tag, and then put our database table name which we are consuming, and looks like we should have it ready by now. Another error, some out variable was not assigned. Of course, now you have an output variable here called etbupa tab, which is of type ttbupa, which has three fields. You are returning business partner ID, company name, and node key, and the order also is different. So business partner ID, company name, and node key, and that has to be now assigned. So I have to now export this value. So I've used export parameter of my method, Abap method, and put it here. This will now goes off. All the syntax errors are gone. You see all the syntax errors are gone, and we can just go ahead and activate now our database, uh, our class as well as this AMDP. Let's do a quick check once again. If there is any problem, this is definitely going to tell you. So first save it, just a normal ABAP related thing. First save, then do a check, and then finally do an activate. So will it create a database procedure when I activate my class? Anybody? Will this create database procedure now when I activate my class? Of course not. So if I just quickly show you in the system, I will take you back to the system, and in HANA DB, basically I go to HANA perspective, go to my catalog, go to my ABAP related schema, SAP A4H, and just try to show you if the procedure has been created or not. So I come down here and then look at the procedures, and let's see if this has been created. So do you see a procedure name with class name arrow and the procedure which we created? Do you see the class name is ZCL my AMDP? Do you see ZCL my AMDP here somewhere? No, we don't see it. Correct? So procedure is not created when you activate the class. 100% certification question. When is the real DB procedure or database procedure gets created when you use AMDP? The answer is when you call the AMDP first time. That's when the procedure gets created into database, not when you activate the AMDP class or AMDP method. Is that clear to everybody? Okay, so let's go ahead and activate this guy. Already activated, yeah. And now I'm going to create my first ABAP report, ABAP program, calling this and getting all the business partner IDs available in the system. So let's do that. This is the name of the method and this is the name of the class. So it's always done with the help of class name arrow, method name as a static method call. Remember, always static method call. Go to ABAP perspective. That's where your real power of ABAP development tools are. You can work with a single Eclipse development environment to work both with your ABAP related stuff and database related stuff. That's the real USP of using ABAP development tools. Hope you now can see the value of using ADTs, which we discussed in earlier classes. Okay, so let's quickly create here a new source code, a new report program. So right click, new, and just gonna create it as an ABAP report program. And let's name it as Y demo OIA using AMDP, ABAP Managed Data Procedure. Later, okay, maybe I just use it as basic AMDP, and later we will build the whole OIA scenario using AMDP. Okay, so basic AMDP, okay, AMDP example, and just say finish. So I'm now going to just invoke this guy, and let's see what happens. So what's my class name? ZCL underscore my AMDP, and that's my class name. And then there's a method into it, get bupa all, control space, shift enter, and you see it generates the signature for me. And then I can just declare the data type also, LT business partners, type my class name once again, ZCL my AMDP, and then use here the table type bupa, the type which is there created in the class, same table type I'm using, and then we're good. And then let's capture what it returns me, this guy, into here. Okay, so that's my code. Save this, and I'm just finally going to do a demo output, cl abap demo output class. Anybody do you remember the name of the class which we used for output? CL demo output. Yes, this is the class. And then call a method to display this data on the UI. So just display and then control space, press shift enter, pump in the data which you have recorded and just call this guy. So it's going to return you all the data from database by firing a query on the database. Let's activate it. Very simple example of an ABAP managed data procedure. So activated this. Let's execute it as an Abap application. It is going to launch the result screen now. So I had just executed it as an Abap program. And wherever there's no support from ADT, it launches a SAPQUI window, and that's your result coming out of AMDP. Wow, beautiful. Now, hopefully we should go back to database as I mentioned and go to HANA development perspective, right click here on procedures and do a quick refresh to see what's in there. So let me right click on procedures in my SAP A4H schema procedure section, refresh, and we're going to see something magical happening here. And let's come down and there you go. You can see ZCL my MDP get Bupa all. This has been created automatically. A procedure has been created and it also creates the version of the procedure. So if you create a procedure and then you change it and then you change it, it just adds a timestamp or the date on which it was activated, what time it was activated. So it creates a backup also for that procedure, so you can anytime switch back to the lowest version. Like in ABAP we have concept of active version, non-active version, so that is completely supported in conjunction with SAP HANA DB with the help of this concept where HANA or ABAP stack creates multiple procedure corresponding to one procedure, ABAP managed data procedure in HANA to keep track of its versions. So you see that is why you see there are two entries. One is which is the latest active version and the last active version. So that's how ABAP stack managing the versioning feature also, because in ABAP we have full versioning maintained or supported using ABAP stack. Okay, so that's our first AMDP. Very simple example, nothing exceptional. Let's create a next AMDP and call this AMDP in that AMDP. Okay, and that one which I'm going to create, I will be creating to calculate the gross amount total for customers. Okay, so let's do that. So come back to our class. Let's define another class method to now calculate the total sum amount per customer. So we will be using our type for our OIA kind of scenario. We will do a short OIA scenario because I don't want to do it again once again in SQL script. We already did it in HANA. We're going to reuse that code next to create an end-to-end OIA scenario using MDP and see the runtime for that. So just say total and then I say company name, type SNWD BPA table hyphen company name. You see code completion is there, and then I say gross amount, type SNWD underscore sales order hyphen gross amount, and then they will say that next thing currency code, type SNWD underscore sales order hyphen currency code. Then end of TY total. And then next we will of course create a table type for that. Table type total, type table of TY total. Okay, and let's quickly create the method here. Get sales figures or get unpaid amounts. Exporting, once again parameter should be passed by value, and then we have et values, let's say, and that's the type of that is going to be tt underscore my new type total. Okay, so total, and then let's come down we gonna do implementation, so you can use the code completion here. Click on this bulb symbol. It says implementation is missing, so I say add implementation for me please. It just creates a basic template for the method, and then you can say by database procedure, hold the stuff, SQL script type. Once again same code. This is something like you can also copy paste quickly, and using my table snwd underscore sales order invoice header, and then I will use snwd sales order invoice item. And then next table, next is what I'm going to use is in AMDP, guys. So for getting the business partner data, we will use this existing AMDP of our class. Okay, so let's use this guy, um, and equals to greater than, and the another AMDP name which is already there into this. So this is what I told you, that if you want to use a database table or another AMDP in a AMDP, you got to mention it in the using section. Very important. So I just mentioned all three of them here because I'm going to use them. So let's first get all the business partners. So I say LTBP, I declare it, and then just call this existing AMDP. Okay, so call this existing AMDP in double quotes. That's how you're going to call this, and then that's it. It will get called. So this AMDP will get called now by another AMDP. Okay, so identifier must be declared. LTBP has not been declared. I don't think so. We can actually use like this. We can say importing, and what it is returning, basically it returns me control space. Okay, it returns me uh, a table type of called et bupa tab equals to ltbp. That's what I'm doing. So I'm declaring it. Okay, it's giving me an error, syntax error. So let's click here for options, add colon to local variable. No, why it's giving me an error? Ideally it should not. So basically this LTBP is going to be a local variable, guys. I'm creating a local variable. At runtime, this will be created automatically. It should not have this smiley actually before this. Still it is not accepting. I'm not sure. There is some problem. We need to cross check. Okay, maybe let's quickly go ahead and write the next set of code. How to basically use this now. So we will quickly check the possible code. How to call an AMDP in another AMDP. So basically I'm just checking this, what is possible code what we have to use. So basically we had now created an existing AMDP which is giving me the list of business partners, and I'm just going to call this next AMDP. So I missed the statement called call statement. Remember, we are writing SQL script, guys. So I missed the call statement. That's the problem. And it is not Abap. This is pure SQL script code what you're writing. See, you're not writing an Abap code. So no importing, no exporting, nothing. So it's just that you have to use the table name what this AMDP returns you, equals to greater than symbol, and of course use a smiley because in this variable you are now going to capture this data. Okay, very important point. So this is done. Why it's giving me an error? If the object this is specified in quote mark, it must be written in upper cases. You see, this is one syntax error. You have to write everything in the capital letter. So ZCL underscore my class name, what is it, my AMDP equals to greater than, and then method name get bupa all. So this is how you call one procedure in another procedure. Yesterday's question, which was asked by El Hadi. So we are seeing it now in terms of AMDP. How are you doing it? So this LTBP will be created automatically, guys. Okay, automatically system will create this LTBP table, which you can now reuse somewhere else in your next subsequent steps. So what I will do next is I will select the data from my header and invoice items table based on the unpaid invoices and currency code. So let's do that. Select uh, sum of my items table gross amount with items table currency code. Okay, this from my SNWD sales order items invoice item table as item. Okay, and of course I want to also select from header table the business partner ID, which is I think buyer GUID, because later on we're going to join this data, right? So that's why you need, so 3 columns I'm selecting. One is this as gross amount, second is currency code as currency code, from my invoice item table as item, inner join my SNWD sales order invoice header table as header, join condition is my header table dot node key matches with item table parent key. This is nothing new to us. We have done this in the past, where of course my client field once again comes into the picture from my header table, and in this I'm going to use the current client, same code the way we've been doing earlier, considering the current context client. When our Abap runs this procedure, it makes use of current client, and that's my client field. And next condition is my item header table, which has the payment status for my invoices, which is should be open. It should not, it should be basically not paid invoices. Okay, so what was the column name? I forgot that. Let's quickly check that. So here you can just do a select star from payment status, Shilpa. Okay, let's try that. Payment status equals to blank. Is that my code? And of course now I have to capture all this, what it is producing, into a table. So LT sales or LT invoice data, that's what where I'm finally capturing it. And now it's giving me some error. Of course I forgot to specify the group by clause because I'm doing an aggregation. So let's specify a group by clause. So group by my buyer GUID from the header table, and then my currency code from the item table. Okay, so just save this and see what's the problem next. Everything is resolved, very good. So now this table gets joined with this LTBP, because I have to now match the buyer GUID with the node key of the business partner table to derive my final result. So I'm going to do a select in my final output. So my final output is company name, gross amount, and currency code. So that's what my final output table. ET values, so I just say ET values equals to select, first is company name, so say BP dot company name, then gross amount, yes it is gross amount, and currency code. So you say invoice dot gross amount. And always it's a good practice, like we saw earlier also in our last example, not using alias name was creating problems. So make use of alias name when you are getting the data from multiple tables. So I will now do a sum of gross amount from invoice data, sum of gross amount. I'm not doing any currency conversion right now. Remember, it's a SQL script code, guys. Though you're writing in an Abap class, it's a SQL script code. Okay, you can test this code first in your HANA console, and then you can put it here as well. You can also create a procedure in your sandbox environment, copy paste the entire procedure code directly in your AMDP. It will work. Okay, as gross amount, and then currency code from my invoice table once again as currency code, from my first table, this guy here, this gentleman, which I had produced uh, as invoice, inner join, and this gentleman here where we produce the business partner data is with the smiley, of course, as business partner, joining on invoice dot buyer GUID. You see it's giving me code completion here, very nice, BP dot node key, which is here, very good. And of course a group by because we're doing a sum of gross amount. So group by my company name from the business partner entity and the currency code from this guy. So if HANA can see there's a parallelization which HANA can apply, it will definitely do it, because oops, I have not marked it as a read-only procedure. So it's better you mark it as a read-only procedure, options read-only. Okay, so that is a good practice if you want to make procedure as a read-only procedure. So it has to be done before using clause, and you see procedure not flagged as a read-only cannot be called read-only procedure. This means, okay, if a procedure is marked as a read-only, it should call only another read-only procedures. So I have to now go here on the top and make this guy also as read-only. The error goes off. Both has to be read-only. Then only I can call one procedure with another read-only procedure. I save this. I'm ready with my code. Let me activate this guy, and hopefully we should not get any activation error, because at design time also it checks for your code if it is bad. Unlike what you were earlier doing, there was no design time check. Now there's a check at the design time when you're writing the SQL script code in Abap language. Okay, so which is done now. Let's go back to our report program, and rather than this baby here, I'm going to call the new procedure, new AMDP, which I have to get me the final unpaid amounts per customer. So let's do that and just get this value into my output table. So just uncomment this piece of code and just get this over here, and then come here, put control space, and then put bupa, save this, and oops, okay, yeah, my export parameter name is not this. With this method it's et values. That was the problem. And yeah, this is okay. TT partner, why it's giving me an error? It's not compatible. Sorry, it's not bupa, it's TT total. Correct, you're right. And let's change the name also for the sake of understanding. So final, and I'm gonna reuse this over here everywhere. That's it, we are done. Save this. Let's activate the piece of code, and I'm going to shoot up this into the system, run this piece of code, and you're going to see the results coming directly from database. First time it may take some time, guys, because the stuff what you're doing is actually going to create your procedure in the underlying database. And there you go, no currency conversion currently, it's just giving you the data. So hope that answer your question, El Hadi. How can we call one procedure in another procedure in SAP HANA? So I showed this in with respect to now AMDP. So you also know how to call one AMDP in another AMDP. This was your question yesterday. I was waiting for the moment to come, and then I can show you this here. Now, how to add this logic if exchange rate is less than something gross amount? Okay, so now for example, if I want to add some business logic here, for example, if my gross amount is more than certain value, I want to print or add an additional column in my output. Okay, so I can actually do that. So let me just go back and do that. So I will quickly come back here to our HANA procedure, and here we can add a dummy column, a new column, and that for that I need to also specify my table. I need to update my table. No problem, Deep, please go ahead. So now I will just come here and provide another variable in this. Let's say customer, which is risky. Okay, customer risk, type character, just a simple flag, and I'm just going to use this customer risk. It's giving, okay, I have to give length 1, and now I can evaluate the customer risk based on a value. So I come back here and I say where case statement in SAP HANA control space, you can generate the case block, and you can put a variable. I want to see the gross amount value. If it is if it is greater than, let's say, this much, then X, else blank. Okay, end as, and the column name actually. So let's go ahead and take the column name. What we added is customer risk column. So end this as a customer risk column. So that's my case statement in Abap in Abap. Basically, this is a DB query. Why it is giving me an error? Case when. I forgot to add a when condition. So case when this is the condition, then X else this. So if the amount, gross amount is greater than something, okay, we should add sum of invoice gross amount. If it is greater than 1 million, uh, yeah, it is 1 million. Okay, no, it's not 1 million, it is 10 less, so it's 1 lakh. So if it is greater than 1 lakh, then it's a high risk customer because unpaid bills exceeded 1 lakh dollars. Okay, so then it's a risky customer, else don't mark it as a risky customer. Save this. That's how you can add your code with the case statement into your SQL query. Let's activate it. You're going to see a new field now coming in the output, which will mark the customer with high risk. Let's execute our report one more time, get submitted to the database. It also does the case statement, and now you see all these customers are high risk because for all of them the amount is greater than 1 lakh. So let me make it 10 lakh, which is 1 million, and then see how many of them are on high risk. Let me increase 10 here and then activate once again my AMDP, and then let's come back and re-execute our procedure. So let's re-execute the procedure and see now how many of them. You see now certainly those which has sales or the invoices which are pending more than 1 million euros, they are marked as a high risk customers. Same thing what we did earlier in our OIA scenario, where we are actually comparing the number of days with the customizing average number of days and the amount. If it exceeds the threshold limit for a user, it would be marked as a high risk customer. Hope that answer both of your questions, El Hadi, today. How to call a procedure in another procedure and how to use case statement when it comes to your SQL queries. Definitely, you can have more nested complex case statements. So one case inside another case, that is also possible. Together with SAP HANA, it's completely possible to have nested case statements. So the complexity increases in that case. But if you can bring me the real business use case, I can even demonstrate, provided those tables has to be there in my demo schema. Okay, in my demo system basically. So your tables are not there in my demo system. Okay, it is that called a wrapper. You can see here where we are calling the wrapper. So here is where we are calling the wrapper. So this procedure unpaid amount is wrapping the get bupa all procedure. So it's a wrapper actually. So like this, you have to build the functionality, guys. Do you remember why the attribute views were used? Anybody? Why did we use attribute views in SAP HANA system? What does it represents? What does an attribute view represents in SAP HANA database? Anybody? What does it is represented? What is an attribute view represent in SAP HANA database? Information model chapter. Does everybody forgot? What is an attribute view in SAP HANA? What does it represents? Do you remember star schema concept? What was an attribute view in case of a star schema? No, 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 no. What is it functionally representing? Of course, there will be a join. No, not attribute. What was an attribute view considered in information model was something called dimension. If you remember our chapter, absolutely, it used to be considered as a dimension. In case of a star schema, where you have a fact table in the middle, and around that fact table you have all the dimensions, correct? So your attribute view were considered to be a dimension. You see, customer, time, sales, all this used to considered as dimensions. So your attribute views, you see here, attribute view was considered to be a dimension, correct? That's what exactly happening in AMDP also. If you look at here, we have written one AMDP which is just getting the business partner data, the master data, and then this is wrapping on top of a fact table join. So I have got now the data here. Okay, I have got the data over here, and now this data I am joining with a fact table which is having the invoice data. So that's how you also actually building your code in that direction. You should break it down into pieces. Wherever you have a master table in picture, put all that code in one AMDP, take the data out, and then you can join it with another one. Okay, so that is how exactly we do it in the system also. Great. So let us move on. And now, so what we saw was creating an AMDP, consuming an AMDP in another AMDP. And you see the beauty is all the SQL script code, it gives you a design time checks, it does a runtime check. Now let's go ahead and implement our complete OIA scenario with an MDP class. So let me quickly go ahead and do that. So I go back to our Abap perspective, create a new class for our OIA scenarios, a new Abap class, and I say Z AMDP or ZCL underscore AMDP, and then say OIA, and then say open item scenario using Abap managed data procedure. Click on finish, and then let's quickly go ahead and in the public section do all the stuff which we wanted to. Basically I have to now declare a type which can hold all the data coming from the database. Okay, so that's what we have to declare it. But before that, let's bring in our code what we have done for OIA. So let me define a method class hyphen method. So let me declare a new method and let me call it as get open item analysis. I'm not sure if this big name is supported by Abap, and then it should be doing an exporting value of et var. Let's keep that as a table name, tt underscore oia. Let me declare this tt underscore oia table type. So types begin of ty underscore oia, and let's declare our type here end of oia. This type table of ty underscore oia, and then let's add here all the properties, company name, type snwd underscore bpa hyphen same thing actually. So company name, then next field was sum of gross amount in common currency, type snwd bpa, sorry, sales order gross amount. Basically you can use Abap type system because it's an Abap managed data procedure. And then you have the customer tagging field, type character length 1, which is just a flag value, average open days, type snwd sales order hyphen okay, not sales order, basically an integer is okay to hold this value. And then sum of gross amount, currency code, I missed it, currency code, type snwd underscore sales order hyphen currency code. So these are all the fields which I'm going to have in my open item analysis structure, and then correspondingly the table type. So type, this is the table type which I have it now here. Okay, so that's the definition of our method. Now let's quickly go to the implementation side of our method for AMDP. So as just now we did it, we're going to define an implementation for this guy. In fact, guys, I will also show you defining doing exception handling for AMDP now in a minute. So let's quickly go ahead and say add implementation for the method here, and then of course we have to say by database procedure, language is SQL script, and I'm a fan of read-only procedure. So we just have to additionally include this option, read-only options, read hyphen only, using all the database table names snwd bpa, snwd sales order invoice header table, and sales order invoice item table. These are all the tables which we are planning to use. Oops, no comma guys, just a space. That should be enough to define the implementation. And now let's quickly write the implementation and return the et var with the final data. So I'm just quickly go back to our previous code of end-to-end open item analysis scenario and copy paste the complete code as it is here in an Abap managed data procedure. right in the line. That's the complete code of your AMDP. Your output table is ET_var. That's very important. So it's not var out, it's ET_var where you get it. Company name, and then you have average days open. Average days open. Field names must match. Very important. And then some gross amount, is that the third field? No, third field is currency code. Some gross amount is the fourth field, and then customer tagging. So some gross amount and then currency code. So these are all the order of the field, same order I'm putting it here, my table type, which is going to get the data. And now you see, okay, SNWD, I missed it. And let's look at any other syntax errors. So database procedure managed by Abap can only define the classes that implements marker interface. Yes, you see it's giving me an error. I forgot to give special power to our class defining the interface name, which gives it special power. if underscore AMDP marker HANA database. That's the special power we give now it to as an AMDP. And now you see it started showing me syntax error wherever it is. Literals across more than one lines are not allowed. I think it's giving me some error here with these literals. So, and you see also we have DP customizing table. So it's a DP cust is unknown. Abap objects and DDIC object must be declared within the method. So this DP cust table, is this table visible in Abap? Let me quickly check if it is visible in my Abap system. So I can do Control Shift A and search for my DP cust table here, my HANA in a BAP system, and you see there's no table called DP cust. Okay, so very important. This has to be removed because this was created in some other schema. We should not consider this, or if that is one issue it will create. So let's put the value of these variables hard coded. So I'm just putting the client value. Okay, I'm just going to get the client value directly from the dummy table in our client field and just get the client value here. So session context client into my variable LV client and from dummy, and then let's maintain rest of the things manually as a customizing entries. So let's use these variables and assign a value. You can also do the assignment directly here, guys. So max amount should be, let's say, 1 million. So let's do that. 1 second, just miss the number lock. 1 million. And when you're doing assignment, use this is an assignment operator. Remember, when you're initializing your variables in SQL script, use this as an assignment operator. And then we have converted currency code should be in, let's say, euro. I'm hard coding it right now. And then user, I don't need it. Maximum number of open days I will maintain as 750 days if it is open. Client we already picking up, so no problem. Date we are already picking up, so no problem. Rest all looks fine. And you see another error here. uh, Variable depends on unassigned currency ICURR. So you see there is an import parameter we used as a currency code. So I can also have an import parameter in my Abap method where we will pass the currency code as an importing value. So let's create an importing parameter I currency, and let me pass it as a char4 to my Abap method. Okay, so I created a import parameter ICURR of character 4. Is that clear? And it has to be passed by value, guys, once again. So that's very important. That's my import parameter I had created in Abap. So this time in my AMDP, I have an import parameter to just demonstrate you how can you use it. So now it is coming and the error is also gone. You see the error is gone. Everything looks okay. No problem. My same SQL code to calculate open item analysis, which we wrote in one of the class line by line, just accept the customizing table, which was only there in HANA DB. Of course, if you create it from above side, the customizing table, which you will do it and maintain the entries using table maintenance generator by your business users, of course, you can query that table as well. Okay. So only accept that part, rest all code is absolutely same, no change into it. Let's do a save and do a quick check and activate and the OIA scenario will be ready. You see the power of SQL script, the usage of SQL script, whatever we learned in SQL script. We spent about 6 hours learning SQL script end to end. And with that, we had finally built the OIA scenario, which is now helping us to build this AMDP quite fast. Okay, done. Activation also done. Let's go ahead and call this in a report. So I'm just going to create a new report program and just name it as zdemo call AMDP. Oops, let's use the same naming convention. Y demo report name, uh, whatever report names we had earlier for OIA scenario. I'm going to reuse that name so that we can relate also the performance runtime for them. So that's why I'm going to do that. So new program Y demo open item, or I just say OIA using AMDP procedure. Okay, so AMDP procedure for OIA, same thing guys, no difference. Finish. Now what about you guys, if you are working on S4 HANA projects, what will happen there? Typically in S4 HANA projects, nobody will give you access of HANA DB. So there is no way you can go and create procedures in HANA database directly. What will you do? Anybody? What will you do in S4 HANA system if you're working in S4 HANA project and nobody never ever gives you actually the access of HANA database directly? What will you do? If you want to do code push down using SQL script, what will you do? Anyone? AMDP is the only way out. Abap managed data procedure, because it is created in ABAP system, which indeed creates the procedure in underlying HANA database for you. This is the only way out. So in S4 HANA projects, there is no way you can create database procedures directly except AMDP. Is that clear to everybody? That's why AMDP is so important. Okay. So let's go ahead and what I'm gonna do here in this uh, report program is use our class. So what was the class name? I will also create a parameter for currency this time, which we were indeed yesterday also trying, but today we will actually see it. So curr code, type tcurr hyphen my currency field, and then let's call this guy mdp zcl mdp oia, and then let's call its method get oia and pass the currency code, this currency code parameter, which is a character 4 actually. So you can just create as a char 4 property itself. So just match it, the data type. And then finally what it gives me here is gives me the final data. So you see the calling becomes also simple, lt values, and that's it. Let me declare this data, this guy, my AMDP class type, and then TTOIA, and just CL demo output, CL demo output dot display. In fact, I want to also check the runtime next, because first time I won't believe on the runtime, because it is also going to take some time to basically create the procedure in the underlying database when you're calling it for the first time. But next time, of course, we will check the runtime as well. So first time, don't care about the runtime, because it will take some time to even create the database procedure in underlying HANA DB. Okay, so that runtime should not be considered a true runtime for it. Okay, activated. Let's shoot up and execute this as an Abap application. It's going to give you nice selection criteria for target currency. Let's pass euros, execute it, and very good. You can see the target currency is euro and all the values have been notified. You can see all the customers have been marked, which are high risk customer according to my threshold values, and it finally gives you the result. Let's take the runtime now. Since your procedure is created in the first runtime, it will also now make sense to just calculate the runtime. So we're going to reuse the code what we have done yesterday to just calculate the runtime. So just reuse that. Here is my timer code for calculating the runtime. Of course, it's going to take less time because you are not calling a procedure proxy now. You're just using a direct Abap managed data procedure. So let's just display all this data at the end, finding the runtime of the final values, LT values. Save this, activate, and shoot once again the report to see the final values. Execute it and pass the currency value, execute once again, and there you go. You can see the results over here. Oops, why it's not showing me the runtime? Yeah, now, oops, it took so much of runtime. Don't know why it's giving me two results. Okay, my old code is also there, guys. That's why the runtime has increased, because it took some time for me to close that old output. Let's do it here. Execute, activate and execute always. Execute once again and pass euro, and you can see only 44 milliseconds it took me to produce my final result. Okay, which is again better than procedure proxy option, which we had done in last class, which was about 48 milliseconds. Now, yet again, I would say my training system is not the right system here to showcase you the power of SAP HANA, but believe me, I have seen the real use cases, the real power of doing code push down using ABAP managed data procedure or CDS views. They always better because that's how you do real code push down to your database. Very important. Okay, and that's indeed the general guidelines. If you look at any latest products from SAP, which is of course SAP HANA be the best in the market now, and every company would be migrating to SAP S4 HANA by 2025. This has been a general guideline given by SAP that every company would migrate to SAP S4 uh, by 2025. So then you would see definitely this is what is heavily used in SAP S4 HANA. Okay, so that's how you work with ABAP managed data procedures. Any questions, anybody? Okay, let's quickly move on now towards our one pending topic. In fact, there are two. One is showing hierarchy view into an Excel sheet. I cannot show that here because my Excel integration is actually not working with HANA. I tested it today, but I could not make it. Yeah, exception handling. Very good point, Shilpa. So let me now do some true bad thing in the system to show you exception handling. So what I'll do is I'll go back to our AMDP and I would introduce a nice piece of functionality. So this customer tagging, what you're doing here, let me just remove this and maybe just try to introduce a nice functionality here. So I just put another parameter. So let me put a parameter, say do a calculation, let's say divide 10 by 0. So can anybody tell me if HANA can divide something by 0? Is that possible? Of course not. Just joking. HANA cannot do things which mathematics cannot do. So I just introduce a nice piece of code here where I am now calculating something divide by 0 as a new value. And of course, you all know that this would lead to dumps in the system. And let me just quickly go ahead and define this parameter also here as an integer value in my output structure so that it won't give me any syntax error as such for this particular parameter. Yeah. So that's what I did it. Et values, and you see it's in fact here itself giving me an error at the design time that could not be derived table type for variable this SQL error division by 0. But in fact, let me try to activate if it allows me, and I can show you what happens. Okay, it's now at design time itself breaking me to not do this. Okay, but how can I show you now exception handling, guys? I cannot actually show you because it will not try not will let me activate itself this thing. So can I do something to show? Can we pass denominator? Okay, let's do it this way. We will pass a value as a parameter to our method. Okay, we will pass a value as a parameter to our method and divide that with the 0. Okay, so maybe I will open my MDP class. This is not the one which we created for OIA. I will open the one which we created for OIA. So let me go to classes, and here it is. And now I will pass an import parameter called value. Okay, so at runtime it would lead to errors. So I create another import parameter in my procedure, import value, and I say I value. Okay, type char, or sorry, type integer. Okay, and then I use this integer value, sorry, no comma, and come down, and when you're selecting the final data, just put comma, and then you say some value divide by 0. So let's say 50 divide by what you passed as an input value, and when you're calling the procedure, I will pass this as 0. So at runtime this value becomes 0, so divide by 0 would lead to a dump. Okay, and then we'll do an exception handling to find what went wrong. So as new value. Okay, and let's declare this guy new value in your output structure, which is here, type I. Fair enough. Now what is the problem this guy has? Okay, sorry, not again importing. All of them are importing, of course. So all looks good, and now you see I have written some logic to evaluate a value at runtime in my query, dividing 50 by an input value. Okay, let's activate it. We will test both positive and negative scenarios. So let's see, I have activated this guy and run once again our report. Now you see here uh, it's giving me an error, and of course that is because my new parameter has to be introduced now, which I introduced in my import as an import parameter to my method. So that parameter is missing, and I just pass value as 5 right now. Okay, so let's pass value as 5 and test it. So in a new column will come called new value, and everywhere, every record, it will have a value as 10 10 10 10, because 50 divided by 5 is 10. Okay, so let's see the output. It will show you the output. Let me pass euro as currency conversion, and you see 10 10 10 10 everywhere. Okay, so it's calculating 10 10 10 10 everywhere. Now let me pass 0. Okay, let me pass 0 as an import parameter value. So let me pass 0. So this is something the database or Abap cannot gauge it. Okay, this is something at runtime the value goes, and it would lead to errors or the problems. Okay, so I pass 0, and let me execute this once again, and this would lead to definitely a dump in the system, because at runtime 0 gets passed to the database, and database of course cannot calculate something divided by 0, and you see it is dumping now. So how will you capture things of this kind, this sort, in as an exception? So as I already told you, the class name for handling the exception is cxamdp error, which you can use for exception handling in under your open item analysis or AMDP procedure. So just put a try catch block here. So try catch, and then nice. So just use the class name as cx amdp underscore error, and capture it in your inline data declaration, which we learned in the past units. And then I just gonna say a write statement of write what went wrong rather than dumping it. Okay, so write what, write this exception, and this exception object gives me a text, meaningful text coming from the database layer, what went wrong inside the database to not lead to a dump, and then exit from the program because there's something wrong happened. Don't display any output. Put this entire piece of code here under this EMDP call. Save this. We are good. Activate it, and let's test the same report passing 0. This would now not lead to a dump. Instead, it catches the exception, displays you what the meaningful result, what database has sent back to Abap, and then exits from the Abap program, printing that result on the screen. Execute it, and just pass the value. Remember, we are passing 0 in denominator. Oops, still lead to dump. There's something went wrong. I'm not sure what went wrong. We need to debug this. So did we activate our program? I'm not sure. Or is the class name is cxamdp error? That's correct only. So maybe let me debug it directly from SEPGUI. So I will quickly launch SEPGUI and test this piece of code directly there. Okay, So I just go to SEPGUI because debugging makes it easy for me in SEPGUI. I'm used to SEPGUI debugger rather than this uh, ADT debugger. You can in fact debug here in ADT. So set up a breakpoint and just click on debug icon. And okay, let me minimize. Yes. No. Let me just quickly start. If it can debug me from here directly in ADT. Yes. Okay, it is not. There is some problem with my ADT tools. It's not allowing me to debug. Let me quickly go to directly SEPGUI window and login and just try to launch the program and just close it from here. Demo OIA AMDP. Go for change and quickly set up a breakpoint to debug everything what we have it here. So of course you can't debug the SQL script code. This is all the SQL script code guys inside this. You cannot debug, but at least I would expect the exception is catched. Okay, let's see. Execute. It's hitting the debugger. And let's press F6. Oops, it's dumping. So you see the exception class name. Let me take this exception class name and go to another session. Open this exception class name and see the parent exception class name. So I take this exception class name, go to properties. The parent exception class name is this as the exception class name. Again go and you see this is the parent class CX AMDP error as the exception class name. Did I use the same or not? Let me check in my Abap report if I use the same for handling and catching the exception. CX AMDP error correct only guys. Why it is not catching my exception? Try catch block this into my data variable and then exit out. There is some problem. It's not catching the exception. Why? Is there any inactive version of something? I can see there is something inactive. Let me check if there's something inactive in the system. Why CLAMDP? You see guys, there is something inactive, but that's our old another class, not OIA one. So there's nothing inactive. It's supposed to hit my debugger guys. I'm not sure. There's some problem. It's supposed to hit the debugger. It is not, but ideally it should hit the debugger because I had put the parent class name over there. No, it is not. Okay, anyways, let's look at this dump now. If you can come down, it will show you the nice stack trace of what went wrong in the system. And you see here, you would get nice full information, division by zero, undefined exception from this procedure. So that is something which it gives you. Information also with respect to what went wrong in the database when you executed the code. And you see also here, just like a normal Abap program, it tells you which point it had dumped. Here you see it is telling you the point where it actually dumped. Okay. So that is something which is visible to us, but of course exception handling is not working. I'm not sure the reason why it's not working. Same code was tested. Maybe what I will do, try to use the same exception class, not the parent class. I'll use the same exception class now. Let me try using the same one, not the parent exception class. Ideally we can use parent exception class to catch the exception of child exception classes as general principle in oops, but here I don't know why. So catch this into the data variable, which is now the absolute class which is throwing me the exception. Execute it, euro again, execute once again. It should catch the exception now. Okay, let's see what happens. No, it is not. Application component not assigned. Not sure, guys. What's the issue with this? I need to cross check. Give me some time. Maybe by next class, I will check it. Why my exception handling not working here? Ideally, it should have worked. Okay. Ideally, it should have worked. Catch, exception type. This is what we also did it in AMDP and it was working. I'm not sure what's the problem with this here. Okay. I need to cross check that. Is this some server problem or is this some code problem? Give me some time. By next session, I will check this. So hope you got some fair idea about how exception handling can be done with an AMDP. So the parent class can be used here. I have even used the child class, but it is not working. Need to cross check this. Let's quickly move on and try to create a scripted calculated calculation view, which was the one missing topic in the last class. Okay, so let's quickly go back and now we will create our scripted calculation view with OIA scenario. So I will quickly go back to SAP HANA Studio, go to HANA modeler perspective, and then I will start creating a calculation view with um, SQL script based procedure. So let's come here, go to our package in the content area, and we will start creating a procedure SQL scripted calculation view. We will use same code, guys, same code, no change. Same OIA code. Once we created, we can reuse it multiple places. It's just that different techniques which I'm showing you now. So there is a question here. Is it true that write statement is no longer honored in SAP HANA to display messages? There, it was never honored. Write statement is an Abap statement. It's not a HANA statement. Okay. We don't use write statement in SAP HANA. It's an Abap statement. Okay, you can use, it's not like not honored, you can still go ahead and use write statement in Abap. There is no problem with that. The exception handling is having some problem, not my write statement. In fact, we used in last example to print the error from ADBC call. Okay, and it worked. There is nothing wrong with it. Okay, there is nothing wrong with it. So catch this, that's what we are doing. Catch exception class name into, we're declaring the data type, and this is at runtime data declaration for our exception object, and then finally we are catching it. So there is nothing wrong in this call. There is something which I think I'm not doing either correctly, or there's something wrong in the server. Okay, maybe you can also try this, what you are saying. Catch exception name directly and see, but this would not give me this guy. I will just say write some problem. I will not be able to now know the exact problem because I don't have the information about it. Okay, so I activate it. So at least see if it is catching the exception properly. Let me try this code now. Debugger is going to start. So if our into class is having a problem now, then we will get to know now with this. You see, still it is dumping. So it is nothing to do with into class. I'm sure there is something wrong with server. 100% sure. Something wrong with server. Okay, let's not waste time on this. I will check this offline. Let's quickly move to a scripted calculation view for our OIA scenario. So right click here. So this was one topic which we had missed it. We had not touched upon. Why? Because I wanted to first teach SQL script to you guys and then came back to this topic. So now you can understand what code are we writing in this. So come here and it's a calculation view OIA scripted. Okay, and then say here calculation view standard, and I'll use SQL script now and say finish. We are ready, and let's reuse the entire OIA code once again. Very good, same code again and again we are using. That's nice. And this will also of course support now your customizing table, definitely, because you are now at the HANA table level. So I will just finish this and it will create a scripted calculation view now for me. So I can click on script view, and you see by default it returns, always return a var out parameter. A scripted calculation view always and always return one output table parameter, and the columns of that table output parameter will be defined here in this columns section. So first let's paste the entire SQL code, and you see here is the var out ultimately what we are producing. And let me just make it maximize. Okay, and define all our output parameters. No code, no other code change, guys. Everything remains as it is. This is already well tested SQL script procedure. It should work fine with my SQL scripted calculation view. Let's add the columns in our var output table. So according to what we have it here, we're gonna add it. So let's do that. Okay, so let's come here, create new columns. So one by one, slowly, company name, average open days, company name varchar 80, average open days, integer. Next is currency code and varchar 4. Next is sum of gross amount, decimal 15 and 2. Next is customer tagging. Remember guys, the name of the fields has to match. Click on OK. Let's quickly check. Average open days, average days open. That's not matching. Let's double click. Name change. You can also change the label if you want. Save this once quickly. And the next column is currency code. That's fine. Sum of gross amount. That's fine. And customer tagging. It's a character column. You see automatically it has marked our integer and decimal column as measures. Okay. Automatically it has marked this as measures. Very good. That's a nice feature. And you can also have import parameter if you want it. Let's say currency code to be passed as the input. You can use it for your scripted procedure. Completely possible scripted calculation view. An import parameter just like your input parameter in the procedure is. Okay, we are done. Let's quickly see, try activating this. This will have some problem. I will tell you once it shows me the problem. I try to check first the data model, our scripted view, scripted calculation view. Let's validate the model. You see it's running over here and it will lead to problems. Yes, of course, as I mentioned, double click, select the log, copy the log, put it in a notepad and see the problem, what it is. So come on the top and you see here it is saying something, create type CVOIA scripted something something as this. Okay, let's see the real problem. Deploy calculation SQL view, transaction rollback, internal error, invalid table name, could not find table DP cust in schema system. See guys, what is happening? It could not find DP cust in schema system. It is unable to find our customizing table. In the system schema, it is searching actually. And that is because the schema for the calculation view which we created, or the schema name which we ideally should give for our calculation view is incorrect. If you go to semantics of the view, go to view properties, and you just come down and check the schema name, default schema you see here, it's nothing, which means but default schema is system, where it will look forward for all tables. Change it to Abap, which was the schema mapping SAP IFORH. Save this, Control S, and now validate one more time your model. Let's see what happens next. So it's running. Let's see what happens. Ideally, it should go good. Again, error. Double click, look at the error. What's the issue? And now let me copy this. And this time I can see it is because of your input parameter. So variable depends on an unassigned variable ICURR. You remember we had used an import parameter for currency code to be converted, and that is not defined. So let's do and define that. So come here, create an input parameter new ICURR, and it's a direct value and a mandatory parameter, and then you can choose the currency semantic type as currency. Data type is varchar of 3. You can also maintain a default value here, constant default value, and maintain it euro. Okay, so by any chance if somebody forgot to pass this, you can use this. Click on OK. Now we defined our parameter also. Once again, save this and validate the data model one more time. Done. Very good. No error this time. Let's activate the data model. Now you may think Anubhav took less time. Of course, we took less time because we already know SQL script. I don't have to teach all of this once again. All of this again coding not required because we already know SQL script. That's an advantage when you know SQL script. We had used same code guys multiple places in a procedure, in a database proxy, in a database procedure proxy, in a typical function, or we had used this also in AMDP. Now we are using a scripted calculation view. Same code is used 5 places. Okay, now you can also look at a data preview directly over here for your data from the calculation view. And now you all know that you can call a particular calculation view in Abap stack the way you want. You can call it using AMDP. You can call this as a proxy view object. Okay, that is also possible. So whatever way option you want, you can actually call it. So you see, you can also do nice analytics. So I want to also look at how much open number, how much gross amount is there per customer. So drag and drop this, you will get a nice analytics directly because that's the beauty of calculation view. So see which customer is having highest pending amount. That kind of analytics you can do it here. You see this customer, this guy here having highest pending amount, and you can see here this is what it is. You can also use multiple criterias, group high risk customers and less risk customers according to your value access. So maybe just put this guy on the value access, and you can see the ones which are in blue color bars, they are with high risk customer. Ones which are there in green color, which are less risk customers. Actually green is very small, that's why in the chart it's not visible as compared to the blue lines. So this kind of analytics possible when you are actually doing a calculated calculation view with the scripting into it. But with procedure you cannot actually produce such analytics. Okay, such a nice feature of our analytical views. Superb. Any questions before we close today's class? All the questions except now final question about hierarchy display into an Excel sheet, that is pending because my Excel integration with HANA is not working in my computer. Maybe I will try to arrange another Excel installation with the proper MDX client and then show you that one scenario which is pending. So that's how you can make use of SQL script guys. All our SQL script knowledge what we gained, we had applied, we had joined and built a complete end-to-end OIA scenario, and with that now we are able to do magic. We are able to build procedures, AMDPs and calculation view with the scripting into it. Okay, and also we saw today how to call a procedure with another procedure, and we also looked at the calculation view which are scripted. In the next session we will start with core data services, CDS views. We all been waiting for, we all been hearing for since long time. We will see it in action in system. We will see the advantage. So one disadvantage of using ABAP managed data procedure is definitely client handling is something which you need to do. This will also go away when you use CDS views. CDS views, that's why they are mainly used. They have a power of doing client management automatically. Okay, they have that power of managing all the clients automatically. So we will see that in our upcoming chapter of CDS views. Thank you so much for joining today's class. See you next weekend. Have a nice day and goodbye. Yes, we will have class on next weekend.